The scrape of $100 bill against the raw concrete floor sounded like a silent, sneering laugh. She was done. The word breakup hung like a dull blade at my throat, right where I usually rehearse my lines of devotion. The pathetic pleas to stay were already forming on my tongue, just like in every other melodrama where she demanded her dose of emotional labor. But this time, the ghostly text scrolling at the edge of my vision stopped me. Isabella's for real this time. She's got someone else. THIS is the last time you'll see her. The sweet nothings froze on my tongue, and my breath hitched. I said nothing. Instead, my pinky finger, as if with a mind of its own, deftly hooked the corner of a bill lying near my foot. I coiled it into my palm, then slid it smoothly up the sleeve of my jacket. The cool paper against my skin was a small, absurd comfort. The female lead is serious, and this guy thinks it's foreplay. TK the money and bounce, dude. Clinging is a bad look. The jarring words streamed past my eyes. They'd appeared out of nowhere 3 minutes ago, the moment Isabella had uttered the word breakup. I looked up at her again. She was still the same untouchable Isabella Vance. A black designer dress clung to her flawless curves, her crossed legs a flash of pale, distracting white. The only thing different was the necklace. The one I'd maxed out my credit card on for her birthday last year was gone. In its place was a cheap, generic chain she never would have been caught dead in before. The brand itself felt like a deliberate insult. DOS, this guy have zero self-awareness. Can't he see the annoyance in her eyes? The comments kept scrolling, sharp as poison needles. The last dregs of hope in my chest turned to ice. I forced myself to truly look at her face, at the features I had studied and worshipped and catered to for 3 years. This time, I saw it clearly, the undisguised contempt in the depths of her eyes. The eyes that once held my reflection now held nothing but cold, sterile distance. My throat was dry. I spoke, my voice so low it sounded like a stranger's. The severance package. How much? Isabella blinked, genuinely surprised. She hadn't expected me to ask that. A cold smile twisted her lips. She pulled a thick stack of cash from her expensive handbag and, with a flick of her wrist, sent it fluttering into the air. The green bills drifted down like dying leaves, settling on the concrete floor just beyond the edge of the plush rug. She crossed her arms, looking down at me, clearly waiting for the humiliating performance she'd paid for. Get IT, boy. It's your last chance to cash out. As she finally sees this gold digger for what he is, shaming him with money. LOL, aside from the male lead, who isn't after her money. SHUT up. They were technically dating. A breakup this ugly doesn't make her look good either. DOS, a kept man, even deserved dignity. The comments devolved into an argument. Silently, I bent down. One bill, then another. My fingertips brushed the cool dust of the floor as I carefully gathered the scattered money, smoothed out the wrinkles, and tucked the neat stack into my pocket. The movements were fluid, almost numb. They were right. This was probably the last thing I'd ever get from Isabella Vance. Maybe it was because I took the money and left so cleanly, but as I pulled open the door, some impulse made me look back. Isabella was still standing there, her expression dark enough to curdle milk. It was almost muscle memory, a reflex conditioned into me over 3 years. I automatically pulled my lips into a smile I practiced 1,000 times, the one that was supposed to convey utter, soul-deep adoration. It wasn't until the comments reappeared, still acting, shameless, that I snapped back to reality. I clenched my fists, mortified, and mumbled, "You go first." Isabella didn't say a word. Her face was a frozen mask as the sharp clicks of her heels echoed down the hallway, each step a final, decisive blow. I watched her disappear around the corner, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed and twisted by an invisible hand. Every luxury item she'd ever tossed my way over the last 3 years now felt like shards of glass lodged in my chest. A bitter sting filled my nose, and tears blurred my vision. Fine, this was the last time. Wait, does this guy actually have feelings for her? I thought he was just a gold digger. A single comment drifted by. I flinched and quickly wiped my face. When I looked up again, the black silhouette down the hall had stopped. She was standing a few feet away, looking back at me, her expression impossibly complex. Was she having second thoughts? Did she want the money back? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I turned and practically fled. My cheap canvas sneakers caught on a loose floor tile, and a splash of grimy water instantly stained my jeans. I knew my retreating figure must have looked pathetic, but at least I was out of that suffocating atmosphere. The single bulb in my rented room buzzed with a sound like a dying insect. I spread the $10,000 across the peeling pane of the wooden table and counted it. one bill at a time. The crisp notes smelled of ink and something faintly bitter. The moment I'd left her upscale high-rise, I'd gone straight to the nearest bank and turned the cash into a cold, hard number in my savings account. $3,000 to go. $3,000 short of $100,000. The economy felt like a sinking ship, and I didn't dare risk investing. A high-yield savings account with its meager interest was the best I could do to hold on to this small piece of driftwood. After I finished the accounting, I let myself collapse onto the creaking bed. A hollow exhaustion washed over me, pressing down until it was hard to breathe. I couldn't deny I was desperate for the money. But the raw, carved-out place in my chest was real, too. I met Isabella when I was at rock bottom. Fresh out of college, I'd been scammed out of my savings by a shady rental agency, only to fall straight into a predatory, unpaid internship. I worked for 3 months straight, and on the last day, they fired me over some made-up excuse. I couldn't even afford to eat. Then, Isabella appeared. Life is ironic sometimes. I'd spent my childhood being told I had a plain, forgettable face, but I was by some miracle exactly her type. She was extravagant, $10,000 a month, and the casual gifts she gave me were worth more than I could make in years. I could never repay her, so I compensated with effort. I studied her moods, memorized her preferences, told her what she wanted to hear, and performed whatever role she needed. She liked me trailing behind her like a shadow. To provide more precise emotional labor, I even signed up for acting classes. With 3 parts genuine affection, I could act out a perfect 10. And besides, under Isabella's daily cultivation, that little bit of genuine affection had long since sprouted and grown wild. It was much more than a 10 now. But a windfall that comes that fast could disappear just as quickly. The water stains on the ceiling formed a blurry constellation. As I was trying to figure out my next move, the ghostly text reappeared. IS Isabella, crazy? She's letting the male lead know the side piece exists. I sent the timeline wrong. The side piece was with her first. The comments argued back and forth like a flock of crows. As my vision blurred from the noise, a single line of crimson text flashed violently. SG wants to use him to provoke the male lead. Let's see if this guy has the guts to take the gig. The moment the words vanished, my phone shattered the silence. Nocturne, Suite 305. Get over here. Isabella's voice came through the receiver, terse and carrying the weight of an order. That last comment was a needle in my heart. We just broke up. 10K, 10K, 20K, $50K. The comments, as if reading my hesitation, started flashing offers. On my way, I hung up, grabbed my beat-up single-speed bike, the one where everything rattled except the bell, and started pedaling furiously against a night wind toward the address she'd sent. The comments instantly filled my vision with insults. Spineless gold digger. He'd sell his soul for cash. Let them talk. For a $50,000 gig, they'd probably run faster than the wind. I knew exactly what Isabella wanted. For me to play the part of the pathetic on-call lapdog in front of this male lead. The role was clearly defined. That made it easier. But as I pushed open the heavy door to the private suite, the practiced greeting of, "Hey, you," died in my throat, and the smile on my face froze solid. The so-called male lead from the comments was Julian Sterling. The same Julian Sterling who had personally kicked me out of the Sterling family home. The usurper who had stolen my life. He stood under the crystal chandelier, his cool gaze sweeping over me, filled with undisguised contempt. The warmth from the 50 grand promise was instantly extinguished by a bucket of ice water. I stood frozen in the doorway, my throat tight. Isabella was waiting. She was frowning, her eyes urging me forward. I forced my legs to move, walking over to her and responding to her questions distractedly. Sensing my detachment, Isabella's face darkened. She stared at me intently until another comment about the male lead flashed, and it was as if she remembered her mission. She suddenly threw herself into my arms. Her movements were as stiff and awkward as a marionette's. I watched her glance over my shoulder and saw the satisfaction in her eyes as she registered Julian's thunderous expression. At that moment, something inside me collapsed, leaving nothing but an endless, soul-crushing exhaustion. It was all so pointless. Almost instinctively, I pushed her away, creating an arm's length of distance between us. Then I fumbled in my pocket for a moment before pulling out a cold, single key on a plain ring. I tossed it on the floor at her feet with a clatter. "Your key," I said, trying to sound casual and liberated, but my voice trembled uncontrollably. The truth was I had no idea what this key was for. The front door to her building used a fob, and her apartment had a keypad lock. Clearly, Isabella didn't know either. Muffled snickers came from the surrounding crowd, her friends. I knew they'd always look down on me. Like the floating comments, they were all convinced this was just another one of my pathetic ploys to win her back. A sudden, white-hot anger flared up inside me, burning away all reason. I raised my hand and pointed a shaking finger at Isabella, my voice distorted with emotion. A good ex should act like they're dead. Don't bother me again unless you have a damn good reason. The suite fell into a dead silence, the air thick and unbreathable. After my outburst, I didn't have the courage to look at anyone. I spun around and bolted, leaving the suffocating stillness behind me. I didn't stop running until I was outside, leaning against a cold brick wall, gasping for air. Isabella dumping me was one thing, but her being with Julian, that wasn't just rubbing salt in the wound. It was grinding it in with a boot heel. I was only 17 when Julian Sterling took my place, tossing me out of the family that was supposed to be mine like a piece of trash. The hunger, the humiliation, the scams I'd fallen for over the years, at least half of it could be traced back to him. The only reason I'd been obsessively saving money was to fuel a fantasy where, one day, I'd come back like some avenging hero from a novel and shove my success in all their faces. But now Isabella was on his side. My fist slammed into the rough brick wall. A dull throb shot through my knuckles, but it was nothing compared to the suffocating pressure in my chest. I felt like a madman, letting my face contort, try to punch all my pent-up rage and misery into that cold, unyielding wall. HOY crap. I actually feel bad for the guy. A little bad. This is objectively awful. Okay, the comments paused for a beat, then exploded. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Like a punctured balloon, I slid down the wall to the cold pavement and broke down, sobbing. Years of suppressed humiliation, trampled dignity, and a terrifyingly uncertain future all came pouring out in a torrent of hot, silent tears. I don't know how long I cried, but eventually my vision was blocked by a pair of pristine white sneakers. I sniffled and looked up through blurry eyes to see a girl with streaks of pink and purple in her hair, crouching in front of me. She had one hand clamped over her ear, and her expression was a mix of pity and profound awkwardness. Seriously, her voice was laced with disdain, but there was a hesitant, clumsy kindness underneath. A grown man crying like this? You love her that much? Enough to torture yourself? It was Isabella's younger sister, Chloe. Seeing that I was too choked up to speak, she seemed to steel herself, then scooted closer. She started dabbing at my face with a tissue, her movements anything but gentle. I always thought you were just a greedy mooch, she muttered, the tips of her ears turning a faint pink. But I guess when you fall for someone, you really go all in. You yelled at my sister like that just to make her give up on you for good, didn't you? She paused, as if choosing her next words carefully, her gaze flickering away. Ethan, you should be with me instead. I froze, the tears stopping mid-sob. I just stared at her. My direct gaze made her uncomfortable. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and started speaking quickly, as if afraid she'd lose her nerve. I mean, if you're with me, you're my boyfriend. Everything my sister gave you, I'll give you too. $10,000 a month. Okay, let's do it. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could think, my voice thick and nasal. I'd agreed so quickly, so carelessly, that Chloe was visibly stunned, her eyes wide. But a second later, a massive grin erupted across her face, her lips unable to contain her delight. Before she could say anything, the sharp click of heels approached from the shadows. It wasn't until a comment scrolled past. LMAO, Isabella really thought he was deeply in love. She made a bet he'd reject Chloe without a second thought. That hit me. Isabella had been watching from the darkness the entire time. She'd coldly observed my breakdown, only stepping out of the shadows, like an actress taking the stage, after she saw me agree to Chloe's offer. Her icy gaze swept over me, then landed on my hand, which Chloe was now gripping tightly. Her eyes were practically frozen over. Her lips parted, but Chloe beat her to it, flashing her sister a smile, so bright it was practically a declaration of war. What's up, Izzy? Here to congratulate me on finding a boyfriend. She waggled our joined hands. You've been nagging Mom and Dad about me, finding someone for years. Well, I found him. You should be happy for me. Isabella's face darkened, her eyes swirling with a rage I couldn't decipher. But Chloe acted like she didn't see it. No need for congrats, just yet. My boyfriend, and I need to enjoy some quality time alone. Your boyfriend? Isabella repeated the word, as if it were the most absurd joke she'd ever heard, her voice tight with fury. Of course, he's my boyfriend, Chloe said, all righteous indignation, holding up our hands again. The real deal, see? When Isabella's gaze fell on my bare finger, her pupils contracted sharply. The matching couple's ring she'd given me on a whim last year was long gone, sold to pay for groceries. The fury in her eyes practically burned through me. The comments erupted. See, she thought he was so devoted. Broke up in the afternoon, sold the ring by evening. TOLDU, he was just after her money. Only our male lead loves her for who she is. Isabella's face is priceless, LMAO. As if on cue, Isabella's expression grew even stormier. Chloe, meanwhile, added fuel to the fire. She linked her arm through mine, pressing herself close, and raised an eyebrow at her sister. Yeah, my boyfriend. What? Are you just going to stand there and watch us make out? With that, she actually stood on her tiptoes, wrapped her arms around my neck, and moved in for a kiss. My entire body went rigid. The blood froze in my veins, my mind a complete blank. In my peripheral vision, I saw Isabella biting her lower lip so hard it had to hurt, a sure sign she was about to explode. Just in the nick of time, Julian appeared. He nonchalantly wrapped an arm around Isabella's waist from behind, his voice a practiced, gentle complaint. What's taking you so long? It's boring in there without you. He never once looked at me or Chloe, as if we were invisible. His presence was like a switch for Isabella. The roiling storm on her face visibly calmed, replaced by an expression I'd never seen before, something almost tender. She reached up and gently smoothed his hair, her voice unbelievably soft. Just getting some air. Sorry to keep you waiting. As a professional who had catered to Isabella's every whim for 3 years, I had never, ever seen that side of her. Just then, Chloe secretly squeezed my hand. I looked down at her. She rolled her eyes dramatically in their direction and mouthed silently. Hooked up ages ago. He's a homewrecker, and my sister treats him like treasure. Her exaggerated, cynical expression almost made me laugh. A small smile tugged at my lips, but it vanished the moment I glanced back at Isabella and Julian. Chloe seemed to read my mind and squeezed my hand again, harder this time. Let's leave this stage to them, she whispered, her voice laced with a mischievous spark. We could go date somewhere else. Just as Chloe was pulling me away, Julian's voice cut through the air. Chloe, he said, using her name, but his eyes were like cold probes boring into me, his tone deliberately patronizing. I'm happy for you, that you found someone you like. It's just, he paused for effect, his gaze flicking down to my worn-out canvas shoes. You've been sheltered your whole life. With some people, you really need to look closely before you leap. The comments went wild. Julian is such a good guy. Saved Isabella from the gold digger. Now he's trying to warn Chloe. OMG, he's literally a knight in shining armor. Chloe, wake up. Don't get scammed by this loser. Amid the flood of praise, one lonely comment flashed by, sharp and unwelcome. If I remember right, didn't Julian start making moves on Isabella before she broke up with Ethan? Interfering is saving now? It was there for a second, then completely buried under a wave of YOURE comparing this leech to Julian. Defending him? You must be one of his kind. I looked down, a familiar tightness in my jaw. Whatever. It wasn't the first time I'd been insulted. Since I'd started seeing Isabella, those voices had become a constant background hum. But then Isabella spoke, her voice as cold as ice. 50,000. What can I do for you? I responded almost automatically. I looked up and met the thick, undiluted mockery in her eyes. She stared at me, enunciating each word with chilling clarity. $50,000. To stay away from my sister. Why are you offering him money? Julian cut in immediately, tightening his grip on Isabella's waist as if staking his claim, while his eyes shot a defiant glare at me. People like him from his background. They have greed bigger than God. The more you give them, the more they'll want. I saw it then. Peeking out from the collar of his shirt was the same cheap, generic necklace Isabella was now wearing. A comment flickered to life. MLE lead uses the poor but ambitious persona to win over the girl, then reveals he's a secret billionaire right when she's falling for him but worried about being scammed. Checkmate. The absurdity of it all hit me like a physical blow. I remembered the day I was kicked out of the Sterling mansion. Julian had stood in the ornate doorway and handed me his old, cast-off suitcase. This suits you better, little brother, he'd said with faux sympathy. Class isn't in your blood. It's something you cultivate like I was. You, Ethan, will never have it. Instead of dreaming about it here, why don't you crawl back to whatever slum you came from and hit the books? Maybe you can land a job, making minimum wage someday. Back then, he'd said that no amount of money could hide the stench of poverty. And now mister. True class was playing the part of a poor man. This world was a goddamn joke. I looked up at the city sky, stained purple by the glow of neon lights, and took a deep breath. The air, thick with exhaust fumes and dust, filled my lungs and gave me a strange, unprecedented surge of courage. What the hell does it have to do with you? Dumbass. My voice and Chloe's rang out at the same time. Hers was laced with genuine confusion. Mine was dripping with venom. We both stopped, stunned, then exchanged a look that screamed, "Nice one." I strode forward and pointed a finger right at Isabella's nose. 50,000? You say that like it's 50 million. Who are you trying to impress? My finger swiveled to Julian, old and new resentments boiling up in my throat, my voice cracking with rage. And you? Wasn't it enough to steal someone's parents and play house as the young master? Now you have to pretend to be the very thing you used to despise? You want it both ways, don't you? You think the whole damn world revolves around you, don't you? The last word came out as a raw, throat-shredding yell. No one could stand being screamed at like that, especially not by me, someone who had nothing left to lose. Chloe's expression was a clear endorsement. You tell him. She was the spoiled princess of the Vance family. Even Isabella couldn't control her. If I wasn't going to ride this wave of righteous anger now, when would I? Was I supposed to go home and cry into my pillow until I had a heart attack? I grabbed Chloe's wrist. We're leaving. I held my back ramrod straight, trying to project an air of defiant pride as I walked away. It was a shame no one but me could see the effort. To the scrolling comments, I was probably just a pathetic, pitiful mess. I think he's actually hurt. Maybe he really did love her. Mystery solved. He's doing this on purpose to make her give up for good. Exactly. If he was just after money, would he yell at her twice? And leave with her sister? He's clearly trying to make her jealous. It's a ploy to get her back. WHO shreds their vocal cords as a ploy. The guy is having a full-blown meltdown. I didn't dare read the rest. I just pulled Chloe along, head down, and ran. Ethan. Isabella's strained cry was left far behind. I'd rarely heard her lose her composure like that. Don't stop. Chloe yelled, running even faster than I was. Ignore her. Floor it. She hit the gas, and her little sports car shot into the night like an arrow released from a bow. Later that night, Chloe dropped me off in front of the glorified closet I called my apartment. She stood with her arms crossed, surveying the cramped hallway like a discerning cat, her lips pursed. This place is tiny. Is your entire apartment just this one room? I was busy checking the $20 bill I'd left under a book on the shoe rack, a low-tech method for verifying my roommate's honesty. Hearing her, I glanced up. Yep, just the one room. My complete lack of shame seemed to throw her off. When I was with Isabella, I was like a carefully manicured bonsai tree, pruned to fit her aesthetic. But Chloe, she was more vibrant, with a reckless, childish energy. Watching her stand there, trying to look disgusted but failing, I found her infinitely more tolerable than the sycophantic trust fund kids who orbited her sister. I thought you were going to do the whole indie movie thing, she said, adopting the dramatic tone of a tortured protagonist. You can be rich, but you will not insult my integrity. My sister totally falls for that crap. The place is small. That's a fact, I said, satisfied the 20 was untouched. My tone was flat. We're normal people, not characters in some melodrama. Chloe burst out laughing, the last of her theatrical pretense shattering. She did a full inspection of my room, muttering, "The security around here sucks." Finally, we ended up sitting side by side on the small bay window, the only spot with a view, each holding a cheap carton of yogurt. She copied me, sticking out her tongue to meticulously lick the foil lid. A smear of white yogurt left a comical mustache on her upper lip. "Ethan," she said suddenly, her voice startlingly clear in the quiet room. "What are you going to do now?" I didn't answer right away. The numbers in my bank account were warring with the job applications I needed to send out tomorrow. Chloe turned to look at me, and seeing my eyes were red again, she became flustered. You're still thinking about her, aren't you? All that anger was just an act? You're really torn up, huh? Do you want to? She awkwardly opened her arms in a hesitant gesture. Hug out. Seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, my carefully constructed walls finally crumbled. My voice came out muffled. I want to raise chickens. Chloe's yogurt-licking froze mid-lick. Her expression was completely blank, as if I'd hit the pause button on her brain. I touched my face, realizing my answer had come out of left field. My family's. Our chicken farm burned down, I clarified quickly. Who burned it down? She asked, shocked. Who has a grudge against chickens? My grandma, I sighed, gazing at the blurry city lights. It's a long story. I told her how, as a kid, I was convinced I'd been kidnapped because I didn't look like anyone else in our small town. After the town sheriff gave a talk at school about missing kids, I tried to run away. My grandparents chased me in their old pickup truck. My grandma, in a panic, slammed the gas instead of the brake, hit a tree, and the spark from the engine ignited the small chicken coop nearby. Oh, so that's what happened. Chloe's expression softened with sympathy, but then her eyes narrowed. Wait, you said a farm. Now it's a coop. I shrugged. The chickens in the coop would have laid eggs, and those eggs would have hatched more chickens. By that math, I owe them a whole farm. Chloe was quiet for a few seconds. So that's why you've been saving every penny. You want to go back? I nodded. I have to. I told her about that night, how the whole village came looking for me with flashlights and found me huddled at the base of a tree, gnawing on a dry piece of bread. I told her how my grandma had cried while she spanked me. That punishment made me understand one thing. There were people back home waiting for me. Coming to the city to find my real family was a gamble, and I'd lost. The Sterlings took me in only to see if this piece of raw material could be polished into a useful asset. Unfortunately, my grandparents had only taught me to be earnest, kind, and sincere. The world of high society demanded deception, cruelty, and a killer instinct. Getting kicked out by Julian was inevitable. It's okay. That's all in the past now. Chloe's hand gently covered mine. Its warmth was a surprise. I turned and saw that, at some point, she had started crying. I knew you were different from Julian, she said, clumsily dabbing at her eyes while reaching for my unfinished yogurt. Poverty. You can't fake that. I instinctively grabbed her wrist. One of those a day. Are you trying to go broke? My sharp tone made her jump, and she started crying even harder. Yes, that's it. Ugh, you look like you're about to fall apart. She sobbed like a heartbroken child. Can I? Kan Yukio. Seeing the teardrops clinging to her long lashes, I sighed and leaned in to give her a brief, awkward hug. It was short, but it was warm. Then I stood up and started nudging her toward the door. Okay, playtime's over. Go home. I have a job interview in the morning. Wait. Chloe, halfway out the door, grabbed the frame and looked back, asking the classic question. Ethan, what? Where are we now? Her gaze was intense, filled with a fragile hope. I rubbed my throbbing temples, looking at her with a headache. When I didn't answer, the light in her eyes dimmed. You said you'd be my boyfriend, she ventured. What about now? I was a little surprised. You weren't just messing with me. I laid out her entire plan. Piss off Isabella, annoy Julian, expose him as a fraud, only to realize she'd fallen for her brother-in-law all along and was now destined to be single forever. At least, that's what the comments had predicted. Chloe's face turned beet red. Well, that was the plan at first, but I changed my mind. Tonight was a real confession. She stomped her foot in frustration. You're too smart, though. You saw right through me. I feel totally exposed. I rubbed my nose, not having the heart to tell her I had a cheat sheet. The past doesn't matter, she said, taking a deep breath, her eyes locking onto mine with stubborn intensity. I'm asking about right now. Are you willing? She quickly added, still 10,000 a month. Sure thing, princess, I said, my agreement just as swift as the first time. Before she left, Chloe insisted on adding me as a contact, immediately changing my name in her phone to my cutest boyfriend ever and pinning our chat to the top. The first message from her popped up the moment she got home. Ethan, see you tomorrow. Chloe and Isabella were two different species. For the last 3 years, I had been like modeling clay, letting Isabella shape me into whatever she wanted, anticipating her moods, matching her rhythm. But Chloe was different. She said she liked the real Ethan. It confused me. We barely knew each other. Where did this liking come from? The next day, I showed up for our date in my most comfortable clothes. An old plaid shirt, faded jeans, and canvas sneakers. When I pushed open the door to the coffee shop, I stopped short. Chloe was wearing an almost identical plaid shirt, jeans, and the same brand of sneakers. We looked at each other like we were staring into a mirror. A huge, unexpected joy bloomed in my chest. No one had ever shared my questionable taste in fashion before. This effortless compatibility made life feel lighter. She'd snatch the last napkin from the dispenser at a diner, or bend down to tie her shoe just to make me hurtle over her like a goat, or suddenly produce a bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from the side of the road. Her stupid, childish antics somehow brought me a pure, forgotten kind of happiness. But in this cold city, I had no brothers, no friends to share it with. So, bursting with excitement, I always went looking for Chloe. One day, I found her setting off sparklers by the riverfront. It was crowded and windy. Chloe! I cupped my hand around my mouth and yelled. The wind swallowed most of the sound. I had to lean in close to her ear and shout, "You're so weird." What? She turned around, holding the burning sparkler, the fiery light illuminating her smiling eyes. I like you too. The screams from roller coasters, the smell of coffee shops, the glow of movie screens, the buzz of street-side diners. Chloe pulled me into a world I'd never known. My childhood in the countryside didn't have any of that. After I came to the city, I was too poor to even think about it. And with Isabella, I was kept in a gilded cage, a silent prop standing by her side. Chloe was different. She made me feel like a real, living person who deserved to be happy. She also kept her promise, spoiling me just like Isabella had. But her gifts were different. A powerful hairdryer, an intricate model kit, a cute refrigerator magnet. These small tokens of a normal life I kept in my apartment. They didn't need to be immediately converted to cash. When we went out, we finally did things I could actually afford. Taking her out for a decent meal no longer required months of saving. We laughed loudly, ran freely, and the feeling of sweat soaking through my shirt was real and exhilarating. I was finally starting to understand the intoxicating feeling Isabella had been chasing, the simple, profound comfort of being unconditionally accepted and accompanied by another person. Late at night, I'd ask myself, do I really like Chloe? The answer was always blurry. But I knew one thing for sure. I'd been lonely for so long, I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone by my side. So, when she presented me with a lopsided, hand-frosted cake to celebrate my birthday, which had actually passed 2 months ago, I couldn't hold back. I slipped out onto the fire escape and called my grandma, my voice filled with a joy I didn't even recognize. "Grandma, I got the money. I'll bring it home for the harvest this year." When I hung up, I turned to find Chloe watching me with a smile. The golden light of the setting sun framed her in a warm glow. Even wearing a matching nerd uniform with me, she looked like an elf who had stumbled into the mortal world. The words, an invitation to come back to the country with me, rose in my throat, but I forced them back down. I was insane. Was I really thinking about asking a princess to go raise chickens in the middle of nowhere? But Chloe didn't give me a chance to reconsider. She saw the emotion in my eyes and seized the moment. "Ethan, do you want to come to my house?" Her eyes were sparkling. "To meet my parents." Maybe the frosting on the cake was too sweet, clouding my judgment. In a rush of emotion, I nodded. Stepping into the Vance family estate again, the familiar, oppressive atmosphere made my chest tighten. I knew this day would come, but when Isabella's icy gaze swept over my hand, still intertwined with Chloe's, the invisible pressure made my back go stiff. "Mom and Dad won't approve," Isabella said. Her voice was calm, stating a simple fact. Her words were a bucket of cold water, snapping me back to reality. I wanted to shrink into myself, to become a hole in the floor. I instinctively started to look down, but my eyes were suddenly riveted by what was happening around Isabella. The floating comments had all turned a vicious, bloody red, roiling with a thick, palpable malice. "D.I. bitch. And she's supposed to be the female lead. Doesn't like the poor guy act, so she just dumps him. T.H.I.'s plot is trash. I want a refund." Isabella stood there, expressionless, in the center of a vortex of filth, like a cursed doll. It was only then that I noticed the faint, fading marks of fingers on her flawless cheek. The heavy, carved door to the drawing room creaked open, and Julian stumbled out, his face a mask of humiliation and defeat. "Mrs. Vance appeared in the doorway behind him, elegantly holding a cup of steaming tea. Her voice was quiet but held an unquestionable authority. "The Vance family has always respected our children's choices. Mr. Sterling, please see yourself out." Her gaze didn't even linger on him, as if she were brushing away a speck of dust. Julian's face flushed a deep crimson. He whipped his head toward Isabella, as if grasping for a final lifeline. But Isabella's gaze remained fixed on the space in front of her, as if he were made of air. That absolute dismissal ignited the last of Julian's fury. He spun toward me, the venom in his eyes practically taking physical form. "You again," he snarled, like a cornered animal, stalking closer. "Are you that clueless? You just have to claw your way into places you don't belong, don't you?" His voice grew louder, his control shattering. He raised his fist and swung at my face. In a flash, Isabella moved. She threw herself between us, a sudden, unbreachable wall blocking Julian's attack. "The Sterling family's line of credit is about to snap, isn't it?" Isabella's voice was as sharp as a scalpel, cleanly dissecting the truth. "Hoping for a marriage alliance to save you? Julian, your posturing isn't fooling anyone. You should remember whose house you're standing in." She tilted her head slightly, her gaze flicking to the cheap necklace at his collar, a perfect match to her own. A cold, mocking smile touched her lips. The comments went into a frenzy. "Emily lead wears the poor guy disguised to get close to the girl, then reveals he's a secret billionaire to blow her mind." So that was it. No wonder he was so good at it. Struck to the core, Julian's face went pale. His fist froze in midair, his body trembling with a mixture of shame and rage. "Let's go." Chloe tugged my arm hard, her voice low. "Ignore these psychos." I nodded immediately, desperate to escape the suffocating confrontation. As we passed Isabella, a faint whisper, almost lost in the air, reached my ears. Sorry, it might have been for me, or it might have been my imagination. Inside, Mrs. Vance was already seated. After witnessing her surgical removal of Julian, I was so nervous my palms were sweating. To my surprise, she was perfectly polite. She simply and silently showed me a world I could never belong to, the glint of a limited edition watch on her wrist, the hand-stitched patterns on the velvet cushions, the nearly invisible family crest on the bottom of the bone china teacup the maid served. Every single object was a quiet declaration of a reality I could never attain. The message was clear: we were from different planets. Even if Chloe was happy to eat from food trucks and ride the subway with me now, our paths were destined to diverge. I could never be an asset to her, let alone convince her to come back to the middle of nowhere and raise chickens with me. The reality that had been briefly numbed by cake and fireworks came rushing back. I started to zone out, my mind drifting to the logistics of leasing a plot of land back home. The smile on Chloe's face slowly faded, replaced by a pale, strained expression. The conversation ended with my distracted silence. I stood up to leave alone. At the door, I couldn't help but look back. Chloe was still standing there, her chin held high, seemingly arguing her case with her mother. I wanted to tell her not to fight, that not everyone is lucky enough to have parents who love them, that she shouldn't damage that for my sake. The moment I stepped outside, a hand clamped down on my wrist with bruising force. I spun around and looked straight into Isabella's red-rimmed eyes. She, who had always been so poised and in control around me, now looked like she was on the verge of breaking. "She's not even here. Why are you still looking back?" Her voice was tight, filled with an urgency and a pain I had never heard before. Her fingers dug into the collar of my shirt. "You can't let her go?" Before I could process it, she leaned in and bit down hard on my wrist. A sharp, searing pain made me gasp. "You let me go so easily, but you can't bear to part with her? Why is she different? Why not me?" she demanded, her voice cracking. Her words were absurd, stinging. She was the one who ended things. Now she was acting like I was the one who had betrayed her. I rubbed my throbbing wrist and saw the red comments, the ones cursing her to die, swirl around her again. A chill crawled up my spine. I just wanted to get away. "Ethan," she clung to the hem of my shirt, her voice trembling with a raw plea. "I could do it too. I have ways to make you stay. Stay with me." She took a deep, shuddering breath, as if it took all her strength to get the words out. "Let's start over. Please." I kept my back to her. I didn't turn around. I just said 2 words clearly. "No, thanks. I have to get home and raise my chickens." A short, self-mocking laugh came from behind me. "How much does it cost to start a chicken farm?" Isabella's voice was back to its usual cool tone, but it was edged with a new, cutting insight. "Ethan, you earned enough for that in your first year with me. So what about the next 2 years? You stayed, didn't you? Because you actually fell for me?" I stopped and turned to look at her, genuinely puzzled. I had to save for living expenses. Isabella froze. The farm, a house, the retirement fund. I ticked the items off on my fingers as if reciting a well-rehearsed plan. I did the math. I need at least 100,000 to be safe. If I could make more, why wouldn't I? This answer, so blunt it was almost crass, shattered the last remnants of resentment, pain, and desperation on Isabella's face. She was silent for a long time before she asked hesitantly, "What if I gave you more money? Enough so you'd never have to go back to that farm. Enough for you and your grandparents to live well for the rest of their lives? I could even bring them here." "I don't need it," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not a greedy person." Looking into her stunned, vacant eyes, I finally delivered the line they had all apparently been waiting 3 years to hear. My voice was light, almost relieved. "You rich people need to understand that you can't buy everything with money." I pulled my shirt from her grasp and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the opulent, cold foyer, a small, lost figure. Even the frantic, scrolling comments seemed to pause for a second, as if choked by an answer so brutally simple. As I walked out of the heavy, ornate gates of the Vance estate, the golden light of the setting sun paved the long road leading down the hill. The long walk down the winding road gave me enough time to process the day's chaotic events. It wasn't until I was waiting for the bus that the dull ache in my chest finally spread. I knew then that it was over with Chloe. Our time together had been short, but she had been like a beam of light, filling a void inside me I hadn't even known was there, childhood playmate, teenage confidant, a partner in crime. All the missing pieces of my life had been temporarily put back together by this one person. I had just been so desperate for someone to be on my side. The days back home passed in a blur. I spent my days in the field with my grandfather, sweat dripping from my chin onto the dark soil. At night, I studied for the civil service exam by lamplight, my grandmother's gentle nagging a constant, comforting hum in the background. Sometimes, an image of Chloe's smiling face would flash in my mind, and a tight, aching feeling would blossom in my chest. 5 months later, on a hot afternoon, a crowd had gathered under the old oak tree in the center of town. The town mayor, his weathered face creased into a grin, spotted me and hollered, "Ethan, get over here. We got a big-shot investor from the city. She's going to build a chicken farm right here in town. Give everyone a chance to earn a good wage without leaving home." I pushed through the crowd and stopped dead in my tracks. Standing in the bright sunlight, dressed in a stylish but completely out-of-place light-colored pantsuit, was Chloe. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She turned, and her eyes curved into crescents, her smile brighter than the summer sun on a field of wheat. "Running a corporation is so boring," she said, winking at me, her voice clear and bright. I pawned it off on my sister. "From now on, I'm thinking being a boss lady on a farm sounds pretty good." She paused, tilting her head as the golden light caught in her eyes. "The only thing I'm missing is a business partner. You in?" An overwhelming wave of joy washed over me, breaking down the last of my defenses. I couldn't stop myself. I closed the distance between us in 3 long strides, scooped her up by the waist, and spun her around in a circle. "I'm in." The laugh that burst from my throat was full-throated and free, the sound of everything finally falling into place. "I'm the boss.